Hey, howdy, hey folks, it is Mrs. Johnson with the Agri Wisdom channel. We are doing FFA lullabies today. Once again, I'm all cozy and snuggled up, because that's when I like to read. We're talking Cattle Country of Peter French by Giles French, who is still not related to the man. And we just finished looking at some photos in this last video. Again, it's been a couple weeks since I've read this, so I'm a little bit out of the loop. I'm sure I'll pick it up pretty quick. But if you're also out of the loop, I started from chapter 1 on this book. I have plenty of videos already uploaded, so feel free to take a peek at this playlist. I believe I have a playlist for this book and then also an FFA lullabies playlist, so if you're interested, take a peek at those, particularly if you like audiobooks or anything of that nature. So we are on page 89, and this chapter is called French Glen Company. Though the Indians' revolt lasted only a few weeks, they caused considerable damage in the Harney Basin. They burned a number of buildings and brush corrals. They tore down fences and let stock intermingle. A great deal of riding was necessary to put cattle back in their proper ranges. Horses were scattered over a wide area, some as far as the Blue Mountains, and horses were needed to separate the cattle. All this happened in the busy summertime, when there was plenty of work to do. Ranchers did not get their affairs organized again that year, even those whose headquarters had not been burned. The Indians did not molest the P Ranch. There, the White House, Long Barn, and the brush corrals were all left intact. French's defense of his men at the Diamond Ranch and his leadership of the civilian volunteers in the battle at Silver Creek made some of the best riders in the county proud to work with him. They took up their own homesteads, married, and became well known in their own right. The French Glen Company Journal lists names still recognized in Harney County, such as George Bullenbog, J. W. Fitzgerald, Gus Harrison, George Polk Needle, William Dillman, William Hudspeth, George G. South, J. Buckmaster, Bolin Fine, and Mart Brennan. We saw photos of him in the last chapter. As a side note, as young men, they helped make French Glen efficient and profitable, well-manned and well-managed. In the P Ranch account books, the first item noted is the receipt of $400 from Dr. Glen, probably the sum French had when he started for Oregon. Other payments totaling $976.46 were made by November of that year. By January 3rd of 1876, the balance on the books was $15,855.81. Although the method of obtaining that balance is obscure, it is not uncommon to find a date on the books out of chronological order, as if there were some afterthought. But that is common with men who keep books only out of necessity, and whose minds are busy with the occupation that requires books. The French accounts do not give a complete record of the little settlement that was the P Ranch, but they seemed to satisfy Dr. Glen, who demanded no additional records or reports. He knew that his partner's strength did not lie in bookwork. Peter French's education was meager, for no schooling beyond the 3 R's was then available except in private school. However, he could read and figure with accuracy, and his handwriting was good, showing practice with the pen. His spelling, though, was by sound rather than rule. Most important, he was remarkably intelligent and had a strong will, so he could learn from experience. Some of the more involved P Ranch deals did not get into the books at all. On September 13, 1877, French bought the diamond swamp from A. H. Roby, from whom he had already bought the mill near Fort Harney. The price given was $42,000, or $42,300, or $1 an acre. The purchase added a big body of deeded land to the French Glen holdings. Getting it, though, was a complicated matter. At the time of the sale, it did not really belong to Roby. He had applied for it under the Swamp Act prior to 1878, when the legislature passed a law restricting sales under the Swamp Act to 320 acres per buyer. Okay. Quick pause. If French bought this swamp for $1 an acre, and the Swamp Act said that people could only buy 320 acres, Mr. French here bought like 100 times more than he was supposed to, or something crazy. Like 10? No, like 100 times more than he was supposed to. 1,000 times more? No, 100 times more. Because he bought 42,000 acres. And that's 2 extra zeros, so that's... Anyway, that's like so much more than he was supposed to have and buy. Anyway, back into it. Considerable, he had applied for it under the Swamp Act prior to 1878, when the legislature passed a law restricting sales under the Swamp Act to 320 acres per buyer. Considerable time passed before the regulation was adopted and permitting applicants with earlier filings to complete their purchases. The state did not accept final payment from the French Glen for the swamp until July 20th, 1885. And so French put it on the books that he bought it in 1877. And didn't officially get paperwork on it until almost a decade later. Which is great. Anyway, back to it. The Diamond Swamp is the biggest swamp in the Harney Basin. It lies north and east of the P Ranch and is a geological extension of the Kiger Gorge. I'm going to turn, hold on. But I can sit up a little straighter and you can still see the things that I'm doing. Because that's helpful to some people. Oh, excuse me. It lies north and east of the P Ranch and is a geological extension of the Kiger Gorge, which comes down from the Steens. This deep gorge holds snow water until late summer, providing water for the swamp. In spite of efforts to drain it by French and others, the gorge still remains a partial swamp. Purchase of the Diamond Swamp brought French into contact and conflict with Darius H. Rye Smith, who would have liked to have had it himself. Smith was also a settler in 1872 and had lived in Diamond Valley most of that time. Because he refused to sell his holdings or be moved by French, a sort of feud gradually grew up between the men, the intensity of which has probably been exaggerated by time and the many romanticists who have written about the Steens country. Rye Smith was a character of distinction, positive in his views. He did not want to move, nor did he intend to. He refused all offers of money or trade. He then threatened French, or shot the buttons off French vests, or was threatened by French, or someone hired by French seems better. Oh, I read that wrong. Rye Smith was a character of distinction, positive in his views. He did not want to move, nor did he intend to. He refused all offers of money or trade. That he threatened French, or shot the buttons off French's vest, or was threatened by French, or someone hired by French, seems better fiction than history. It is not likely that anyone with a knowledge of human nature, of which French possessed a normal amount, would have tried to force Big Rye Smith to do anything. Yet these two were not always embattled. On several occasions, French asked to adopt Smith's son, Corey, born in 1883, and raise him to be his heir. Smith never permitted it. French's operation was growing rapidly. He continued to buy cattle and land, and thousands of calves were born each year on the bunch grass slopes of the Steens. In 1878, he invested $7,560 in cattle and noted a cattle sale of $125,665,000. Numbers are hard. $125,665. In 1879, he invested $10,704 in cattle and sold $23,500 worth. The figures are uneven, but they were probably caused by a fluctuating market. French had around 2,000 head of cattle. Profit from the cattle business was good in those years, almost fabulously so. Joseph Nemo, chief of the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, published a bulletin in the early 80s showing that the profit of Western stockmen was around 20%. He estimated that there were 800,000 head of cattle in Oregon. In addition to cattle, Peter French had hundreds of horses and mules, for which there was steady demand by homesteaders who were coming into the West. Dealers drove bands of horses several hundred miles to settlements to satisfy the market for work stock. A horse that had been handled by a white man was much safer for investment for a homesteader than an Indian cayuse fresh out of the sage, wide-eyed and fuzzy-tailed. On January 28, 1879, Peter French wrote a letter to Dr. Glenn in which he expressed himself clearly about the fares on the ranch. And this letter reads like so. Dr. Glenn, Dear Sir, I wrote you yesterday that I would give you particulars of a sale. The band consisted of 346 steers and 149 cows and heifers, and the steers were 2 and 3 years old, and such cattle as I could not hold. The cows were very good, except some pretty old ones. All Diamond Ranch and P cows. Got an average of $31 and 75 hundredths per head, $31.75. Think I did well considering that they were range cattle. We'll have use for all the money that they bring and more too. I have obligations to meet by the 1st of March to an amount of $30,000. Those Kygar debts are due on that date, but if I make another sale of cattle, I will be able to meet them. You spoke of talking to that Singletary note. If you do so, please write me at Winnemucca. There are a great many beef cattle in this country still for sale, and I'm afraid that there is not going to be any very great scarcity of beef this season. I would take 8 cents for ours anyway. Have some 2,400 head left. I wish you would send me from Sacramento 5 pairs of the chain harness, such as you use there on your ranch, 2 pairs of wheel harness, and 3 pairs of swing. 5 pair altogether. Please order them so they will reach here by the 10th of February, so that my teams will not be delayed. Write to me anyway. Would like to know what you got for those cattle you sold. Also, what cattle there are to go to market yet over there. Regards to family. Signed, Peter French. Among Glen papers for the following year, 1880, is a note indicating that there had been a sort of casting up of accounts between Peter French and Glen, and that there were plans for a division of partnership. French is to receive $55,000 for his interest in the Pea and Diamond ranches and the cattle on same, provided the cattle count out 8,000 head. If they fall short or overrun that number, $12 per head is to be added or deducted from the $55,000 for a third of the number of the cattle. For a third of the number that the cattle overrun or fall short the 800 head. French turned over to Glen October 1st, 1879, 5,061 head of cattle. His interest amounted to $43,244, less than his third share of the indebtedness, which was $5,537.38. Therefore, the value of his interest on October 1st, 1879 was $37,706.62. Paid Peter French March 1st, 1880 as follows. Note: $28,832. Cash $10,000. Total $38,832. This payment also included $1,125.38 in interest, covering the period from October 1st, 1879 to March 1st, 1880, when Glen made the settlement. The division of partnership did not take place, but evidently the usual third share arrangement was in effect as far as it concerned cattle. French had sold cattle early in 1879 for $31.75 a head, making $12 seem low that fall. The partners were entering one of the most profitable periods in history of the French Glen Company. French was making large sums of money, and Glen was spending it. Each was good at his job. French himself spent almost nothing. His notations on expenses to Winnemucca and Canyon City show that his personal wants were few. He did buy a home for his parents in Red Bluff, California, and one for his aunts in San Jose, and occasionally he sent money to his sister Mary. With these exceptions, Peter French's money went for land and cattle. And that is the last of this chapter. Okay, have a great day. We'll see you soon. I hope you learned something, and I hope some of you fell asleep. Okay, bye.